Okay, Mishlei, where are we? 11:29. Yod Aleph Chavtes. And I believe, as I mentioned in the announcement, I don't think I've done this one before, which is always rare to kind of find a pasuk that slipped beneath my my learning. Okay. Ocher beso yinchal ruach ve'eved evil l'chacham leiv. I think the only word that's going to be like foreign to people is what do you call it? Is ocher, which is why I put the translation here. Anyone want to take a stab at translating? It won't bite. Okay, then I guess I will. Ocher beso yinchal ruach. One who, so they say to stir up or disturb. Okay, so the stir up that it's talking about here is if you imagine a clear like wellspring in a pool, where you could like see the bottom, and then you go into it and you go like that and you like stir up the dirt. That's ocher. Okay, so I like using the word one who sullies, okay, which means like make dirty, one who sullies his house, or one who I think just troubles is also fine. One who troubles his household. Yinchal ruach. So how would you translate yinchal ruach? Where's nachala?
I'm sorry. Is that a short for like nachal?
It's probably related, but nachala is the more common form that you're used to.
Nachal, right? That's true.
Yeah.
Nachal.
So where's a nachala?
What is that? It's like not. I know what a nachal is. It's like like a portion, or it's like a division.
Yeah, special kind. Yeah, what kind though? How do you get such a portion? See, this really arouses the contrarian in me, that the more people don't volunteer, I'm just gonna not progress the shiur until someone says something. I mean, it doesn't hurt to guess. You're not going to be condemned. You guys better know what a nachla is. You're a Jew. Yeah, say again.
A portion.
What do you mean by portion? Like if I'm dishing out food, do I give you a nachala of meat?
Like a piece of, or like a rationing?
I mean, yes, but it has a very, very specific connotation.
Is that like land, like specifically to land?
Okay, nachla is an inheritance, something that's passed down from generation to generation. Okay.
That's like Yerusha. That's not Yerusha?
That's also Yerusha. Yeah. But we say this, I feel like we say this like a ton in davening. Okay. So
that's a trick question. Come on.
Not a trick question. I asked you what kind of portion. It's not just a portion. You only use the nachla for something that you pass down. You don't use it for dividing like something like sharing a sandwich. That's not a nachla. Okay, so nachla, and that's when you said, is it related to nachal? I think it is related to nachal, because nachal means river, right? And so it's a like it flows, from higher to lower. Okay, so all right, so one who sells his household will inherit. Okay, what's ruach? What does ruach usually mean? There are two words that it usually means.
Like wind or spirit.
Wind or spirit. Okay, so wind, spirit, and then if you see here, Metzudas ציון says more rare usage is inyano kaas, okay, which means anger. Okay, like we say in Moshe Baruch Tov Gibor. Tov Erech Pai Migibor Umoshe Baruch Milochet Ir. So better to be slow to anger than a hero or a warrior, and one who can control his anger is better than one who can capture a city. Okay, so three possible meanings here. All right, the Eved, Evil L'chacham Leiv. So what is an Eved?
Servant.
Servant. Okay, and what is it in Evil? Yeah. So and I'll just say an Evil, which is obviously we have to define what kind of mishlei fool he is a servant l'chacham leiv.
To the chacham's heart, to the wise person's
To a someone who is wise of heart.
wise of heart.
Yeah. Okay. So now that we've pulled some teeth, all right. So Metzudas Tion, the only thing he adds is ruach is kaas. All right, Sadigon says, so Sadigon takes some liberties here. Okay, he says, Hanochel es hasichlus, one who inherits foolishness or the foolishness. Mevayesh es mishpato, shames his family. Okay, very different from what we have here. V'lachein, and therefore, roi shihei hasachal eved l'chacham. It is fitting for the fool to be a servant to a chacham. Okay, and then I think Targum is just a straight up translation. Achir bese yiras pachasa. Oh, so that's interesting. So pachasa, we got to look up here. Hold on just 1 second here. Let's just go to the Jastro. If I had to guess what pachasa is, I would guess that it's related to pachos, but I don't know if that's going to be true because it could be anything for all I know for Aramaic. Pachasa. Oops. Let's go to pachasa. Is pachasa. I missed it. Is a breath. Okay, yeah, ruach. Okay, so the sichla you have a Abdul Hakim Liba. Okay, fine. So that's just a straight translation. All right. Now let's look at our minimalist translators in the English. We have our scroll. One who troubles his household will inherit wind. And the foolish one will become a servant of the wise of heart. Okay, so that was pretty much like ours. Living Knox says he who destroys his household inherits the wind. Okay, so he goes with destroys. That's a little I mean, if I was going to say destroyed, I would say runes, maybe. I wouldn't say destroyed. Will inherit the wind, and the fool becomes a slave to the wise-hearted. Alter says one who blights his house will inherit the wind, and the dolt is a slave to the wise of heart. Okay, he likes using the word dolt for Eviel. Okay, so there are our translations here. What are our questions?
Well, how is this? I mean, how are these two psukim opposites, or like, what's the relationship between the two?
I mean, two halves.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, what is the relationship between the two halves of this pasuk? And you see that Sadion makes it into a story, right? Oops, sorry. Did I delete this? I deleted this. To be a servant to a wise person. Yeah. In other words, he's talking about a fool. Wait, hold on a second. Hanocha as hasichlus, sorry. Hanocha as hasichlus, mavayish es mishpachto. Yeah, and therefore is fitting for the fool, right? I'm assuming that the fool Sadigon is talking about is the same one who inherits foolishness. So it's like telling us a whole like series of events here. Okay, so it might not be opposites, but it could be. Okay, what else?
What's ocher? Like, what does ocher actually mean? And then also, I don't really understand like the inchal ruach, because I feel like I wouldn't like interpret that first as bad, but I feel like the way that they're speaking about it sounds negative.
Okay, yeah. So what does it mean to inherit ruach? Okay, and like why is that bad, as the pasuk seems to imply?
This reminds me of Esav and Yaakov.
Interesting.
Yep,
There's definitely some inheritance stuff there.
Yeah.
How do you sully a household? What?
Yeah. Okay. Let's actually say, let's add that in relation to a household. Yeah. Now, by the way, I am translating this as household, but for the record, bais does mean house. I'm just assuming it's not talking about a physical house. So, but yeah, what does ocher mean in relation to a household? How
Does it mean family also? I mean, family seems very different from house.
Right. Yeah. So that's what I mean by like household. The household is like the people in the house, not just the physical structure.
And
what's
what
the topic of the pasuk?
Yeah. What is the subject of this pasuk? Yeah, it's kind of all over the place.
And also, like, what does what kind of trouble or sully is he doing?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's included in number 2. What does ocher mean?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
In the person in the first half of the pasuk, like the one who sullies,
Yeah.
is he the avil? Is he the wise of heart, or
Yeah.
is he a
Okay.
third character?
Who is the person in the first half of the pasuk? Okay, so is he the fool, like Sadigon? Sorry, like Sadigon implies, or is he someone else? Is he another? Yeah,
So usually we're comparing a fool to a chacham. Here
right,
we're not doing that. We're comparing him to one who's wise of heart. How is that?
right. Okay, so what is a chacham lave, and how is this different from a regular chacham?
Also, in what way is the Avil a servant to him?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. How? So yeah, in what way is the avil a servant to the chacham lave? And then we should ask also the related question: how did he become such a servant?
Is there a significance, or what is the significance of the change in tense of the pasuk? Like in the first half, it's one who sullies will inherit, and in the second
Yeah.
half, it's an avil is a servant.
Right. Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and say, I'm going to ask this as an if question. Sorry, as a is there a significance to the change of tense from future to present, or is the whole thing in one tense? And the reason why I'm saying that is it looked like with the English translations that we had, then they, and Sadigon also, well, so Sadigon actually does seem to be addressing, because he's saying it's fitting for the fool to be a servant to a wise person, but it seems like the English translations were okay saying that this will happen.
According to Rav Sadigon, just asking questions on his translation or explanation or whatever you want to call it. What's the foolishness that? How is he inheriting foolishness? Like
Yeah.
from where?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah. What does it mean to inherit ruach? So I'm going to add that here. If ruach means foolishness, how can one inherit foolishness?
And it's interesting because Rav Sadigon and the pasuk, it seems like really different too. Like it's just like the first half of the pasuk is completely different.
Yeah,
Like
I mean, he takes ocher like really so he's saying, okay, just to show you the way he's doing, so he's saying yinchal ruach, one who inherits ruach. So he's saying ruach is foolishness, so that's like the first move he makes. And he's saying beso means his family and ocher means to shame, so he like dirties his family, right? Like, that's how he's getting it.
How is he? Sorry, can you explain? I must have missed it. How do you explain that Rav Sadigon is learning he inherits the foolishness again?
So he's saying ruach as foolishness. I'm not sure where he gets that from, but he's saying yinchal ruach, he will inherit foolishness. Okay, I don't know how he's changing it from future to present. One who inherits foolishness, right? Yinchal ruach. So I'll just do it color coded, right? The yellow. Hold on a second. Yellow corresponds to yellow. Okay, one who inherits foolishness, shames. He's learning ocher is to shame, and then beso is his family, which is reasonable, right? It's his household.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rifki.
Yeah, so I know we started speaking about like what it actually means that he became a servant, X, Y, and Z, but also just on that topic, like, are we assuming that that means that the like chacham lev is it like an active position of him like saying like, oh, like this person is my servant, or is it more like because of the avil's actions? Like, I'm basically saying, is it something we can learn about the chacham lev, or is it more speaking about the avil?
Okay, that's a good question. Yeah. So does this servant master, does this point about the servant, is this point, hold on a second. Is this point about the servant master relationship more about the Avil or the Chacham Lev?
If it is about the veal, is there a possibility for that to be a positive statement and not a negative one? Because if you're a servant, to be a servant of a great master is kind of like an honor.
Right. If it is about the Avil, might this be a good thing for him? Yeah. Or for the household.
Wait, why would it be a good thing?
Because if you are a servant, so being a servant is not necessarily the best, is not necessarily not a high position, but if you're a servant to someone who's a chacham, then that could be a good thing.
Like Eliezer to Avram.
Yeah, right. How timely. Yeah. Okay. Are we good here?
No, who's the audience?
Oh yeah, who's the audience? Who is the audience? And I think we also have to definitely ask, what is the situation? What is the scenario here? Yeah. Tough one. Okay. So I guess we'll start thinking. I mean, I think maybe before we start thinking, it would be a good idea to just have a brief conversation about where does one begin in a pasuk like this, right? Like which question do you think you have to start with here?
Why are you specifically asking this question over here versus any other pasuk?
I think in a lot of the other pasukim we've done lately, then it's been it's either there are multiple inroads, like multiple starting points, or I feel like it's pretty easy. Here I feel like there's room for treachery, or there's room for slipping up. I mean, okay, maybe I won't make a judgment. I mean, maybe we'll just see how people start. Yeah.
Wait, sorry. I can make a suggestion, just like technique of like how
Sure.
If someone wants to approach something complicated, is you could either look for something that makes sense to you and that's like a loose thread, and like pull the loose thread and see what the rest looks like because of that one thing that makes sense to you.
Right.
Or you could try to find the knot, the thing that's the most confusing to you,
Right.
and like work at the knot until you loosen it, and then
this
kind of everything falls.
Yes, this would be the good time for me to tell the anecdote from my first year in yeshiva, even though it's I think it's the same point Zach is making, but it's using different language. Is when I was, so in yeshiva, then we use the brisker derech, which is a certain method of using, of analyzing a Gemara, and one of the things that we do is what's called defining a machlokus, which is trying to understand the conceptual underpinnings of any disagreement, right? So when I first came to yeshiva, then Rabbi Moskowitz said, Rabbi Mann said that if you have a machlokas that you're trying to define, you should start with the side that's the easiest to you, because you start from what you know and then you work your way outwards. That was Rabbi Mann. Then Rabbi Moskowitz said, no, don't do that, because if you start with what makes sense to you, then you're going to be confining your mind along lines that are already in line with your intuition. So how are you going to see outside of your intuition? So start with a side that doesn't make sense to you, and that's how you're going to break out of the limitations of your thinking. And then I met with Rabbi Chait, and I asked him, this is what Rabbi Mann says, and this is what Rabbi Moskowitz says. Who do you think is right? And he said, I think both of them are wrong. And I said, so what do you mean? And he said, I think when it comes to methodology, then there are no rules. so that's there you go.
I love that answer.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so let's having said that there's no rules, let's think. Let's take our thinking minute. And as usual, we'll start with people who think that they can have a either a full explanation or a big move, and then we'll work our way down out from that. Okay.
Do we have a word for someone who sullies? Is there like a character in Mishlei
I don't think so.
for that?
No, I don't think so. Although it's funny, by the way, that when we go to the Mefarshim, then you'll see that a lot of them do say that this is talking about a specific Mishlei character, but it's not one who's actually named in the pasuk. Well, this is a
It's a
tough
very
one.
Japanese pasuk.
Yeah.
Um,
You mean it's like very cryptic?
well, you're bringing dishonor, and that's
Oh,
so big
dishonor.
in
Okay, yeah.
Asian
Right.
culture.
Right. That's true.
And then you're releasing not just misfortune, but anger and wind and things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
You know, the Japanese movies always have, it's revenge for previous generations of
Right.
wrongdoing.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone have any moves? I'd be super surprised if anyone has like a full explanation of the pasuk. Yeah, Rifki.
So I have something that's like very like I think it's pretty simple, but I think it could also help like jumpstart like
Okay.
better thoughts
So do
from
I.
it.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I was thinking that someone who is speaking specifically about a household, and I think like what comes to mind when I think of household is like structure and like, like let's say like the father specifically is like supposed to be like that base of like this is what we do and like this is how we do it. So I think that I was thinking if someone was in that position and then did the opposite of that, then what they will get is not like you're not first of all passing down any of those character traits that you would want to be passing down that are positive in terms of just how to run a household and interpersonal relationships, but you're doing the opposite because I don't know exactly, that's something I'm not clear on is how exactly is he ruining it or stirring it up or whatever it would be, but clearly he's doing something wrong. And then for himself, I'm like assuming that the consequence is that he's getting like, let's say less control. So as a result of him not being able to control, his household in whatever shape or form, then his personality and his character traits are getting like, I feel like when you think of spirit, like in Navi or in like, I don't know if it's in Chumash, but I know it's in Navi that like, it's usually like, whether it's good or bad, it's not controlled. Like it's like a very powerful, thing. So that's like what I'm thinking about the first half. And I also have something for the second half, but I don't know if anyone
Sure.
wants to
So just to comment on the first half. So what's interesting is I think you're raising an interesting question, which is this, I guess this is related to question 10. Is this talking to a father or is this talking to like a son, like the generation that is passing stuff? Like, is this talking to the head of the household? Because, like, I think you were going with the fact that it is talking to the head of the household because he's the one who can corrupt the household, right? But Sadigon puts it in terms of the son, seemingly, right? That the person who is inheriting something, and also just the use of the word inheriting kind of points to like, I mean, I think it point both directions, but Sadigon saying it's talking about the son, seemingly, right? So I think it's interesting which direction you can go. But yeah, that's one point. And then the other point is that so you're saying that if you corrupt your household, then that is going to lead to a certain kind, since that's if the household, the way it's supposed to work is there's a certain passing down of stuff in an orderly, organized way, that if you have the proper values, then things get transmitted in a good way. But if you corrupt your household, that leads to a certain like disorder in what's passed down, and that you're saying is reflected in the word ruach. It's like,
yeah, and also like for the household, but also for the person himself, like whether it's speaking about, I think it could speak to the father and the son, because I think that it will affect the father and then his character traits will be negatively affected in the long run, and the same thing with his offspring.
Okay, sure. Okay, good. I think that's good observations for the first half. You want to say what you're going to say for the second half?
Yeah, Zach, were you going to say something?
Oh, yeah.
Well, yeah, I was just saying, could we potentially review who the veal is?
We could do that. Yeah, we could do that. Okay, let me think how I want to go about doing that. Give me 1 second. Yeah, because the veal is a little hard because the veal is in many ways, if you had to pick like one quintessential Mishleic fool, then I think the Avil would be the best candidate. And the reason for that is because in the thesis pasuk of Mishlei, then the Avil is the one who's highlighted. Thesis pasuk being 1:7. Yiras Hashem Rishis Das Chacham Umusar Evilim Bazu. So fear of Hashem is the beginning of knowledge. And then Evilim despise or scorn Chachma and Musar. So that's the primary quality, is that they despise Chachma and Musar. But then if you want to look at let's look at my working definition of Avil. And this again, it's funny, I quoted this morning also. Not the same fool. This article is in sore need of an update. So on my Mishleic spectrum chart here, where white is the middle of the spectrum, and then yellow is developing in the good direction, green is very good, and then blue is beyond Mishlei. And then on the leftward development, you have orange means you're getting bad, and then red is you're really bad. So Avil is basically between the youth and between the Ksil. So he's not super bad, but he's on his way there. And my working definition of an Avil is, and this is actually from Rabbi Moskowitz, the Avil is someone who seeks immediate gratification. He's the opposite of the Chacham. He's so caught up in his single-minded pursuit of immediate gratification that he will choose short-term pleasure or benefit, even if this brings about long-term pain or harm. And he will forego long-term pleasure or benefit if the price is short-term pain or harm. This severely limits the perspective of the Avil, restricting his view of reality to a superficial level. Right, Moskowitz always says that the Avil is the superficial one. He just sees things on a surface level. Although it might be possible to reach the Avil through Mishlei, this is an uphill battle. For this reason, the Avil is not included in Shlomo HaMelech's intended readership. Yeah. So, and again, I had a note here that just because he's a Mishlei fool doesn't mean that he is low IQ. You can be very, very smart and still be an Avil. But the Avil is caught up in the superficials and in the short term. Yeah. So Rivki, did you want to say the other part of your idea before I call on Ariel?
Yeah. So I don't remember as well because I was trying to concentrate. But I think like it was basically along the lines of that. I was actually taking it that the Avil is the first person. That was just my
person who does the corrupting of the household.
Yeah, like the Sully, that whole thing. So I would say that the Avil is that person, and then I'm not sure what the relationship to the Chacham Li would be. What I was just thinking is just in the most like simplistic terms is that when you don't have like those controls over either your emotions or the way that you interact with people, especially your family, because we know like that's when you have like the least restrictions on how you act, then you're going to be subject to people who are smarter than you and can manipulate you, and not manipulate in a bad sense, but just it's a fact. Right.
Yeah. They're going to be the ones who are calling the shots, because you can't direct your own life through your own decision making in a directorial way. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I think that is a good overview of the pasuk. Okay. So let's get other approaches on the table or other ideas. Yeah, Ariel.
Yeah, I should just have a question.
Sure.
Why are we under the assumption that that he would even want the inheritance? Maybe the family are a bunch of Evilim and he's a Chacham, meaning is it in a situation? I guess the question is like, is it a situation where we just care about the inheritance and therefore you should just act in a manner where you do everything just to get it, therefore that will make you not an Avil in this specific scenario? Or like, you hear what my question is?
I think this is going to depend on what we say the inheritance is, right? Because the general thing is, I mean, the only thing you can inherit, the only typical thing you can inherit that you don't want to inherit is debt, right? But typically inheritances are things that that are good. So I think that's why we're working with the assumption that this is good. And the fact that it's saying instead of inheriting, like money, like this, Ocher Beso is definitely bad, right? So someone who's Ocher Beso will inherit Ruach. So we're assuming that it's Ruach, which is bad, instead of something which was good. I think that's why we're working with that assumption.
Well, I mean, let's say it's, well, I guess it also depends what you mean by good. I mean, like if it's just a bunch of money, right? Then that's good, right? I mean, some would say that's good if you inherit like $1 million, right? However, you could be a chacham or you could be a tzaddik or whatever within that household, and relative to the household who may be a bunch of Rishaim, like you're causing trouble to that house, and you still won't get anything because they'll hate you. So my question is, in this specific context, relative to getting the $1 million, even though you're a tzaddik, are you considered an avil? Or that doesn't really apply because we don't care about the monetary aspect of it, and we're discussing a separate case. That's kind of what my question is.
That question I did not follow.
Okay, we'll try again.
Sure.
So if we are saying that the inheritance is less than like $1 million, right? And the $1 million is good. It's not debt. It's $1 million, right? Yeah. So, and the pasuk says if you cause trouble in your household, right?
Yeah.
Now you as a tzaddik, right? The kid in the household as a tzaddik, right? If the household are filled with a bunch of Rishaim, right? The tzaddik relative to the Rishaim will cause trouble in that household because he's anti that household.
Okay, I think this seems to me to be really complicating what the pasuk is talking about. I don't know where you're getting all these assumptions from.
Well, I'm just trying to understand. The reason why I'm asking this question is because, what kind of inheritance? What kind of inheritance is it?
Are you
if we're
trying to
focused
test
on
the parameters of this pasuk?
I mean, plain shot of the pasuk. Okay, I mean, I know it's sometimes people it's fashionable. People like to say, well, what if it's exactly the opposite of what we think, and that's a fun move. But let's just stick to plain shot right now, which is the corrupter of the household is someone who's doing something that is bad. Okay, like an uncorrupted house is good, corrupting house is bad. Inheriting is usually good, but since this is a bad mishlei guy, then he's inheriting ruach, which is somehow bad. And then we're also assuming that the avil being an eved to the chacham is something that the avil doesn't want, right? Maybe Zach's right that it's objectively good for the avil, but I don't think that's his goal. I don't think if you ask the avil, what do you want to do when you grow up? Oh, I want to be an eved, So I think let's just work with those assumptions, okay? And unless we have firm grounding for saying that this is talking about a tzaddik kid in a Russia's house and he wants to corrupt them in order to bring them down. That's just too complicated. I think that's there's no warrant to make those assumptions. Yeah. Okay, Zach.
So I think I have a full idea.
Okay.
Let's see though.
Sure.
So I think that the pasuk is talking about, the topic of the pasuk is talking about generational flaws.
Okay.
I
was wondering if anyone was going to take that with the inheriting either spirit or anger or something. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So the way in my mind it's reading as one who sullies his household will inherit this spirit.
Yeah.
And so essentially I'm looking at this as that you could have two kids of flawed parents, and one will have more of those flaws and one will have less.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is talking about how to navigate that.
Okay.
And by calling out those flaws and sort of focusing on them and pulling them out into public and speaking about them, you're sullying where you come from. And this will make you more likely to inherit that thing which you are calling out. And a couple of points just to explain that. One is, you can imagine that even if that flaw isn't really there for a second, if a person is just calling out something, they're focusing on seeing it. And I think I heard from Simon Sinek. He talked about how professional race car drivers know that when they're on a course not to look at obstacles, but to look at the gaps in between them, because when you focus on something, your brain automatically starts gearing towards it.
Uh-huh.
And so I think that this is like the principle is talking about, is that if you're constantly like calling out the flaws of your parents, saying, oh, they do this and they do that, like true or not true, you're now like shifting your mindset, and you're making yourself more likely to develop those flaws or to not see things clearly, maybe not to inherit the good qualities they have because you're so focused on the bad qualities. And so a person would be better off like not focusing on those qualities and not just constantly calling them out, and then hopefully not inheriting those flawed qualities. And so the second half of the pasuk, I think, is basically talking about the trade-off that occurs, because I think that this issue of calling out flaws is applicable to people that might be on like the positive side of the Mishlei spectrum, like wise or intelligent or good character people that still might feel a need to call out the bad traits of their parents. And I think that's why it says one, because it's like an undefined character. And it's saying that even an avil, like maybe instead of and it'll say but an avil who's not even thinking on this deep layer of like, oh, I'm gonna call out and like focus on the bad things of my parents, his outcome, like his bad ending, is he's gonna be the servant of someone who's wise of heart, which like isn't so bad. So it's like if you think you're gonna be beating the avil by like calling out on a like non-superficial level, then even on a superficial level, like that person will end up better than you. So basically don't focus on the bad traits of your forebears.
Okay, so all right, so I get what you're saying the theme of the pasuk is, and I see how you're reading the first half of the pasuk, but I don't understand the mechanics of what you're saying for the first half, and I also don't see how the second half relates. So let me now unpack that. So you're saying that the pasuk is about calling out, is about sullying your household, which is focusing on the bad traits in your household, and you're saying that the first half is telling us that if you do that, then you're gonna make yourself more prone to inheriting those traits. So I don't understand how that works, because the muscle of race car driving notwithstanding, I don't see how that's going to necessarily I don't see clearly how that is going to necessarily happen with character traits. Like, let's say you have a kid, let's say you have a kid who was raised with parents who always like fly off in a rage when the kid does anything wrong, and the kid grows up and he says, I don't want to like throw tantrums at my kids, so whenever I get angry, when I have kids, whenever I get angry, I'm going to go into another room and count to 10 and take breaths. Like, it seems like being aware of the faults could lead, especially if you're talking to someone who is trying to like avoid bad faults, which is the person talking to, it could lead to like not passing on those traits. So
right, exactly. And that's why I think this is talking to like the good spectrum of Mishleic people, because there is I agree with everything you just said, but there's, I think, a possible false route that can occur, which is, instead of focusing on being aware and avoiding, is instead of like the focus being on change, its focus comes on specifically sullying. And I don't know if you've ever seen this before, but someone will call out something that they don't like, and that's their good deed. Like their effort isn't changing themselves, their effort is calling it out, and like, aha, see, I called it out, so now I'm better than them because I called
that's
it
very
out.
fashionable.
And then you're like witnessing them exhibit the same qualities, and you're like, well, you're doing the same thing. So I think that it can start as almost good as intentions of like, oh, I'm going to call out something bad, but then it can use up, like, you can just put in all your energy into sullying of your forebears. And rather than that, it's better to just not focus on sullying them and just internally acknowledge that you want to do better, gaining awareness and making those efforts. I think that's obviously a great thing, but don't let the sullying overtake that and
let me
consume the energy.
just suggest a more specific mechanism of how this occurs now that I know what you're talking about. is I think the people who are focused on identifying the bad behavior so that they can avoid them, like you said, yeah, there's no need to call them out. But the people who are focused on calling them out, usually that is in an effort to like distance themselves from the imperfections that those have, as if to say like, well, I don't have these bad traits. And it kind of is operating in a very comparative or relative value system where you're so like, intent on just being pristine compared to your household or your family. But the type of that type of person who wants to just like be viewed as someone who's pristine, that's usually the type of person who's very blind to their own faults, so they're going to end up,
it's like creating a fantasy instead of like recognizing the danger.
And not only that, but like if they have kids, and if they themselves are just like focused on saying, well, I don't have any of these flaws that my parents have, and they are like creating this thing where they're denying or like not willing to look at their own actual faults and operating this very relative value system, chances are they're going to pass that down to their kids also, and then it's going to just repeat itself. Ariel, just do you have a separate approach? Do you have a question on Zach's approach?
I have a separate approach, but
Okay,
I wanted to give other people an opportunity
thank
first.
you. Yeah. Okay, so we'll finish exploring Zach's first. Okay, so that takes care. Yeah, Chaim, you have a question on Zach's approach, or you have a no? Okay, so that takes care of the first half of Zach's approach. Okay, now Zach, say the second half again, and how is that relevant to the first half? I missed it.
So I was thinking that it is it's like a comparison motivation for this individual, because this person likely has good intentions. They're calling out bad behavior because they're recognizing it's bad, but they're kind of getting lost in the fantasy of it's not having anything to do with them. And their thinking is like, oh, I'm like looking at like the qualities of my forebears and recognizing that they're not good qualities, and I'm calling it out, which is not superficial, right? So they're deeper than the avil. The move I think that Shlomo is saying is like, even an avil who is superficial, but they may inherit these flaws, right? Because they're not even aware or not focused on that.
Yeah.
But well, actually, no, I can't say that they're going to inherit it, because then it doesn't change a separation. But what I was aiming at is that their end game is going to be servant to one who's wise, which might not be the most ideal, but it's certainly not the worst outcome.
Okay, so let me, I think I finally hit the intuitive track that you're on. So let me just tell me if this is what you're doing, which is that you have these people who are in a multi-generational system, and by the way, I think this can apply not just to like parents and kids. I think it's going to apply to institutions, to to like anything where you're like, you're kind of beholden, like, to Masorah, to Judaism, whatever, like, to some other generation. So you have these people who are hypercritical and are intent on like sullying the household that they're a part of, and they are gonna inevitably view themselves as being more sophisticated, for lack of a better term, like looking beneath the surface and like exposing all of like the bad stuff. But because they're doing it in this distorted way, then it's going to perpetuate, these problems and make things worse. But in comparison, even the avil, who is only looking at stuff superficially and who's like kind of like oblivious to all that stuff, will often end up in a better position than those other guys. Yeah, I see the move you're making. I wanted to do this last week, but like I still don't know if I'm I know it's an ever evolving story, but I feel like I don't know, it's such an interesting lab of human behavior to watch on Twitter these days, with like Elon Musk. That's kind of what he was doing, just going in and then I'm not saying that Twitter is a great platform, but just going and like, saying like, oh, Twitter's doing that wrong and that wrong and that wrong and that wrong, and just thinking, oh, I'm the big shot, I can like all these things, and you're seeing he's just generating so many more problems, that
Mm.
are just gonna, keep perpetuating themselves. Yeah. Okay. I hear what you're saying now. I really like the first half. The second half to me, so this is maybe a Mishlei taste of mine that I can't claim that all the Mefarshim hold. I feel like the second half is not as necessary as the first half. I feel like it's almost like an afterthought, and I think that's what's bothering me about it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and I agree with that. I think that bothers me too.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay,
what was
good.
the second
I
half
like it.
again? Sorry.
Second half is that
As it-
oh, sorry, go ahead.
It's kind of motivational that like the veal who's not even as deep is gonna end up in a better position
Right.
because he's not taking this false.
Yeah, and see, I think maybe that's the other thing
approach.
that bothers me about this is that if Mishlei is going to contrast the first half with someone who's taking the right approach, then I feel like the Avil is not the one to contrast it with. Like,
Well,
yes,
it's not. I don't think it's contrasting it with someone who's taking the right approach. I think it's saying that like you'll be better off if you take what we recognize. Like you're likely if you're this in this category of someone who's like trying to call out what's bad, you're likely recognizing that veal as someone not to be. And so he's saying if you recognize the veals not to be, then you should realize that if you keep on this strategy, even he will end up on a better position than you will be
Yeah,
in.
I don't know, but I still just in terms of the derech of Mishlei in general, I feel like Mishlei, if you're an audience that Mishlei is talking to here, I feel like Shlomo should tell that person how to constructively use this desire to avoid faults of the predecessors instead of saying like
Right.
targeting the secondary thing. I think that is part of the same
Right.
question.
I hear that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But
Yeah.
very good for the first half, though. Okay. So now Ariel wants to be last, so we'll go with Chaim and then Benji.
Okay, yeah, I have a question before I start though, or two
Yeah.
maybe. But yin chal, are we able to use that to mean like referring to uh the person who is
Queeths.
yeah,
Yeah. I also wanted to do that.
okay.
I don't think you could read it that way. Let me just see if all Torah's thingy can help me with that. But I think Yin Chal is this is where I need to ask Ken. Because Ken's always telling me how like the way we think of things as past, present, and future tense is not how biblical Hebrew works. And we just kind of like cram it into there. And I don't know enough about grammar to say that. Okay, so this is what is no okay, yeah. I don't know. Yeah, sorry, I don't know.
Oh man, I had a whole
No, you
shot and
try it
everything.
anyway. Sometimes what happens is you pick up on an idea that is that you think you get from the language, but really you're getting it from the core of the pasuk, and then like there ends up being another way to like read it, so tell me what you want to say.
Okay. All right, so I'll try it then. So my first move, I want to say that the person who sullies, sorry,
Yeah.
the inheriting part is talking about the sullier, and I'll call that person like the father, right? So that's a
Yeah.
person who's troubling or ruining his household.
Yeah.
So like I'm kind of like reading it as like he'll be inherited by like anger. And then also, so I'll get to like that in a second, but I also want to say that the Avil is the father in the pasuk, and that the Chacham Lev is like the son in the pasuk.
Okay. I like that.
The way I'm seeing it is that like I'm trying to work out exactly how the father like ruins his household, but
Yeah.
if I'm like contrasting him or comparing him or melding him with the Avil, then you could say it's by like looking too much into like the here and now and not looking into like the future of his kids. Like whether it's like, kid gets a bad grade on a test and like dad just like goes ham on him, he's like, what are you, stupid? You're never gonna like be successful, whatever. And then and like doesn't like look down the road and be like, okay, this is just like one little like minute like detail of like his school career or whatever.
Yeah.
Or like just not being able to like prepare for like his kid's future and stuff like that.
Right.
Which will like do two things. It'll like make his kids like upset at him. They'll be like, and then they won't want to be like him. And I think is an interesting thing with the the ruach versus the chacham lev is that the ruach is like, I'm viewing it as more of like an outward thing. So like they'll like rebel outwardly against the guy, but if they be like, I'm kind of like reading chacham lev as like cunning, or like crafty. And like I wasn't sure if that was gonna work. And then I thought about like chacham lev and like the Mishkan, and like it's like literally like a craftsman. So like I don't know if that actually works, like craftsman crafty, but I'm trying to like make that work.
Okay.
And that like so like it's like a crafty kid who is gonna manipulate his dad, you know, because he knows how his dad functions, that he's just gonna like react like immediately to like immediate pain, immediate pleasure. Like he'll be able to like manipulate him to do things that he wants. While at the same time just like acting out and, you know, like making the dad be like, he's just a crazy kid, you know, not spirited. Sorry, he's spirited. He's just like a crazy kid who just like, you know, is like so spontaneous or whatever. And the father will think like everything's fine. He's a crazy kid. But, like he's not like thinking, you know, about it. But like on the inside, the kid's like a chacham lev, right? He's like, that's what I'm saying, chacham lev versus like chacham. Is that like it's more of like an internal thing that he keeps to himself. Like he doesn't like tell his, you know, he doesn't like let his avil dad, you know that like really he's like pulling the strings or whatever.
Right. Okay. So first thing I want to do is I want to save your reading of the pasuk. Okay.
Okay.
I think I can read it in a way that will express the idea that you want, which is let's say the case here is let's say like I'm the dad and I have this huge like company that I'm very proud of, and that in my mind, like this is going to be preserved as my legacy through my kids, right? So that is my inheritance, okay? And let's say I got it from my dad, and like it's going on, you know, to the future. So if though I ruin my kids either by like making them into, you know, availing or driving them away or whatever it is, so then essentially I've inherited wind. You know, like I've gotten nothing. Like what I have is nothing. Now the only thing that would make your reading nicer is you're trying to say that I'm passing down nothing, you know, but I'm saying like I've gotten the nothing. But maybe we don't have to use the company example. Maybe we could just use the more common example of like, you know, wealth that's passed from generation to generation, you know. Yeah.
I forgot to mention this, but I was using a similar reading to Zach, which is that it's like a familial kind of thing.
Yeah.
But like it kind of, you know, not that it backfires in that like the avil dad is like trying to make his kids avil him, but in the sense that like due to the father's characteristics, like the kids want to rebel against that, and like they'll be able to like recognize it and say like, I don't want to be like that. Yeah. You know, and then it'll backfire in the sense of like inheriting is like more of like the characteristic kind of thing. That's how I'm seeing it.
Yeah. Okay, I hear that. Hold on. Second half. Yeah, I also like the movie. So I gotta just say a little methodology thing. Usually I don't like it when an interpretation of a pasuk involves telling a whole story, like multi-part story. But I feel like Sadigon kind of gives us that license here, or just the weirdness of the pasuk gives us that license. So I just want to say, like in general, like the whole thing about like, you know, the first half is describing chronologically something that happens, and then like as a result of that, you know, then the, you know, this Ocher Beso is the Avil who then will become an Evid to the son. You know, usually I'm not a fan of that, but I think it can work here.
I think just because you mentioned Sajigon, I wonder if I can fit this into Sajigon himself. It says, the one who inherits the foolishness, right? So again, so the kid who ends up becoming like the father, that'll be shameful in whatever sense you want to say shame is. I don't know. I mean, I'm not 100% sure on like that, like whether it's just like, you know, objectively like bad, or, you know, just objectively whatever you want to classify shame as. And therefore it's fitting for the fool, i.e. like the Avil father, to be a servant to the wise person, in the sense that like, again, like the son's gonna like manipulate him. He's gonna like, you know, he's gonna learn how to like not be like his father, and instead just like kind of like try to work around him.
Yeah. Okay, I think this approach has promise also. Okay, so Rick, do you have a question on Chaim's approach, or is this a separate thing?
Just a question specifically about Chacham Lev.
Yeah, sure.
So I was thinking, can we interpret Chacham Lev as, because I personally don't, I feel like it's obviously different than just a Chacham, like it's trying to tell us a different idea. Mm-hmm. So I was thinking specifically in this pasuk, like at least how I'm interpreting it is that like it's really about like control, whether of control of emotion or control of how you're supposed to react to things. So with the conjunction of that and then the Chacham Lev, could we say that the Chacham Lev is like not similar to a chacham in terms of his wisdom and in terms of how he applies it, but in terms of like emotion.
So meaning it's highlighting the quality of lave to differentiate him from the
From the chacham.
From the avil.
Yeah, that's what I was
saying
asking.
both. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Oh, I was thinking from the avil in the sense of like if the avil is like reacting to immediate stimuli,
Right.
like those are like purely like emotional, like
Right.
reactions. That's yeah.
Right.
So like in that
Yeah,
sense, like I see that.
Yeah, that definitely works, and just I like methodologically the move that the way you set it up, Chaim, is that chacham lev is a term from chumash, so either which means like a craftsman, so either chacham lev is a separate thing, or this is talking about Mishlei's regular chacham, but it's highlighting the lev because either focusing on the internal or focusing on the self-control to contrast it with something that's necessary for the pasuk. Yeah, that works.
So can you just summarize Chaim's like idea in like a couple sentences, just like the main subject of the? Like it's a little lost.
Yeah, actually, Chaim, would you mind? I don't know if I can faithfully do the.
Yeah, I'll try to do it in a couple sentences. Basically, the idea is that the dad is the avil in the pasuk, and due to all of his avilness, his kids will grow up to resent him, and by resenting him, they're both not going to want to be like him, and then they're going to learn how to not be like him, and by seeing his flaws, and then to the dad, he's going to just look like some crazy, kid, but on the inside he's really a chacham levi, somebody who like keeps his like smarts on the inside, and he's going to be able to like manipulate his dad because he knows his nature, something like that.
Yeah, that last part I think is the part I'm not as sold on, but I think the other parts has potential. Okay, let's go with Benji and then Ariel, and then we'll look at some of Farshim and see if we can work it out.
I had a question, also a couple of approaches. One, did you say you don't like the fact when the second part is secondary, or supposed to be secondary?
I said earlier that I generally speaking, I like a certain symmetry in a Mishlei pasuk, and I feel like both halves of the pasuk should be equally necessary for the main idea, and the second half shouldn't feel like an afterthought.
Okay. So my first approach was kind of like what I thought Zach was going to say, that you're like selling kind of like whatever the generation from before or whatever, but you're basically saying like, yeah, that's like what we are. And then you're kind of just like, that's kind of like self-identification issue, where you're saying like if I were to say, oh yeah, the Weisses are just always late, and that's just what we are, we're just late. And then we can never break out of that. That's like the way we identify ourselves.
Okay, that's interesting. So you're including yourself, so meaning the person's including themselves and not just making accusations of the other generation.
Yeah. And that's why
that's going to perpetuate it. Okay, that's good. That makes a lot more sense, in my opinion. Yeah.
And then I'm not sure the Eved, like you could just say like a cop out, like he's a servant to a chacham lev in terms of this quality. Like in this quality, he's much worse than the chacham lev, because the chacham lev is going to be able to evolve and change his negative qualities. Yeah. But he's just going to stay stuck in this negative cycle.
Yeah.
I like what we were saying before, the chacham lev is like chacham in terms of his emotions, and like how like there's like the two aspects to a chacham: one, that he can make decisions without letting his emotions block him, and two, that he's able to create good strategies.
Yeah.
So there's just focusing on the part that he's able to think without his emotions like clouding his thinking. So he'll be able to recognize that and not make that mistake.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I really, really like the first half. Let me just process the first half again, and then see if I can understand the second half. So the first half is saying that if you are hyper focused on sullying your own household, which is just like talking about these bad qualities that your family or your household has, then that's going to make you more prone to just normalizing it or making it part of your identity and then just passing it on. Like, yep, that's just what we do. I mean, you could see this, I think a lot on like national levels. Like for some reason, the thought that came to my mind is like, yep, Syrians are just late. You know, like that's just how Syrians are. Like they're just late to places, and then that just perpetuates it. Like if you had a person who said that they're it's Syrians, right, who are late. Is that the one that they always have to like have the wedding announcements like a couple hours early? Am I just imagining this? This is true, right? Can anyone confirm? No,
I don't think it's true, but okay.
Oh no, I thought it was a known thing. Isn't that?
I'm
I've
just joking. I have no
definitely heard
idea.
What was
It's
that?
definitely a thing.
Yeah, right. Like they
I don't
actually
know.
like when Syrians make wedding invitations, they make the time like 2 hours earlier than it actually is because they know that all of them are going to be late. You know, but you know, anyways, so that, I mean that's on a much more massive scale, and yeah, the only problem I have with this, hold on just a second. Okay, see, I had the same problem. Like, this would be really nice to read the way Chaim wants to read it, is that you would bequeath that to the next generation. But I think, can you do it the other way around, that the one who inherits the foolishness, to inherit foolishness, inheriting foolishness comes from someone who did this. Like that's how foolishness is inherited, you know. That someone who sullies his household, someone who sullies his household is the one who passes on this thing as an inheritance, you know, because a real character trait you develop on your own, but the way that it's passed through families is just that is through this type of sullying thing. So either way, I think the idea is good. Okay. Now say again the second half in light of this.
What? Sorry. say again?
Yeah, just say the second half, Benji, again. I missed it, I think.
I'm not sure about the second half. I mean, I was thinking about while you were like viewing like the person. I'm not sure. Like the chacham. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, yeah, second half is a hard one. Yeah. Okay, Ariel, what do you have to say? We've got a lot of good first half approaches here.
Okay. I really wish Zach was still here, but
Oh,
I had to go. Okay, so I think this approach fits in better with Sadigon. I also think that there's a possibility that it can also work with the normal reading of the pasuk.
Mhm.
All right, I'm gonna start off by saying that it's I think it's metaphysical a little bit.
Okay. Okay. Let me put my seatbelt on.
Ariel, is that your way of saying Derek, Mr. Ariel?
I like the word
I just wanna
metaphysical
know- I know what
better.
it means. Yeah.
I want to say his family means the family of Torah values, having that,
Okay.
right? And someone who inherits foolishness is kind of that just means that he's bringing in values that are anti the true value system of his family, meaning like the Torah that was passed down to us through Misora,
Okay.
right? That's how I'm translating, and ultimately that foolishness is what brings shames. What brings shames to the is what shames the value system, the Torah value system, and because it's almost like bringing in those values will hurt you as an individual, right? You might as well just give up pursuing. Well, no, I take that back. You might as well just follow someone else who's a chacham, because that will be safer than just going off on your own.
Mm-hmm. Meaning, if you're corrupting the Torah's values, then following a chacham would be
Yeah,
better.
if you're living life with corrupted value system,
Mhm.
whether you're corrupting the Torah's value or you have some Torah value, but at the same time you're twisting it to
Yeah.
live your own lifestyle, you might as well just abandon that and just follow someone else's value system that's in line with the true idea. So this way you're safer than what the alternative would have been.
It's definitely creative. It's definitely creative. Yeah, you are explaining both halves. Okay, let's do ourselves a favor here and get some guidance from the Mefarshim here. Okay, so
Oh, come on, you're not even entertain it.
I mean it's creative. I mean I like the second half on yours better than the first half actually, but yeah. Okay.
All right.
Here we go. Metzudas David. Metzudas David I think is going to be the most simple one. Let's see. Okay, so he says Atzel. So I mentioned to Zach that is this talking about a Mishlei personality? So a lot of the Mefarshim say this is talking about the Atzel, the lazy person. Okay, and just a refresher that according to Sadigon, Mishleic laziness is someone who avoids immediate pain and conflict at all costs, like that they have a compulsive need to avoid immediate pain and conflict. So Atzel asher bavur atzluso ucher umashchis b'nei beso. So the lazy person who on account, actually I could type this out like I usually do here. Give me 1 second, just so we can look at it. Metzudas David. Okay, so the lazy person, bavur atzluso, on account of his laziness, okay, which is the immediate, the compulsion to avoid all immediate pain and conflict. Okay, so ocher umashlis b'nei beso, corrupts and ruins his household members. Kilo matza yado lases lahem de maxoran, because he doesn't Chaim saw that, he doesn't have the ability to care for their needs. Hine bezeh yisrabe hamriva v'hakas. Behold, this will cause an increase of fighting and anger, right? Because remember, Metzudas David is the one who says he will inherit anger. Okay. Ukilu yinchal le'atzmo. Oh, he makes the move that we've been looking for. And it is as if he inherited for himself anger. The anger, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So this is what we were, I mean, in a way at least. So like, in other words, it is talking about what he's producing, but it's talking about what did he get? He basically inherited anger, the anger, the sofa davar, and ultimately, Yihye asher evil hazeh, this fool, Yihye eved l'chacham lev, will be a servant to a wise of heart, l'hachios nefesh atzmo, to sustain himself. Okay, so let's just take a stop and see what he's saying here. So he's saying we're talking about a guy who sounds like he's just basically financially irresponsible, that he's not providing for the needs of his household. So that's what it means he corrupts or sullies or ruins his household. And so what's going to happen is he's going to create a whole bunch of anger in his household because he's not providing for his kids or whatever. And then ultimately he's going to have to be dependent on someone else. So the question is, what is the subject of the pasuk according to this? Like, it still is seems like a weird focus.
It sounds like a 40-year-old man living in his parents' basement playing video games all day long.
Right, but he has okay, that's interesting. I mean, I'm assuming that this is the father though, because he has
the father.
He has b'nei bias, which he's not providing for. So I think that's what he's talking about. Yeah.
Okay, and that's so it sounds like a 40-year-old man with kids in his house playing video games all day long.
Right. Yeah. Right. So what is the what's the chidush of the pasuk? I mean, yeah, okay, fine. So you don't provide for your family, they're going to be angry, and then why focus on saying he's going to end up being dependent on a chacham? I mean, I understand he's going to be dependent on tzedakah, right? Like he can't support himself, he's going to be dependent on tzedakah, but why focus on being dependent on a chacham?
Also, why is that a bad thing?
Yeah,
and like, who's this talking to?
Right. I mean, it's definitely bad if you're dependent on someone else and you're not providing for your family, right?
But like, if you are a fool, then it would be better. You'd be better off if you were dependent on a chacham, I guess, in some sense.
Yeah, I mean, I guess. But well, here's the thing. First of all, I don't know if we're calling this guy a fool in general. We're really calling him a lazy person in general. And I think we're secondarily referring to him as the fool, like, because he basically did foolish stuff. But I mean, even it's not a good situation to be in. I mean, yeah, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, Rivki?
Yeah, I was gonna say that maybe it's like specifically using chacham lev in order to contrast like the quality that he specifically doesn't have. Because if you just had tzedakah, then you wouldn't necessarily get that contrast, because then it would make it seem about the money. But we know it's it's not supposed to be focusing on the money here.
Yeah. I mean, the funny thing is what ends up happening is he ends up, he should have been in a position where people are dependent on him, meaning his household, and he botched that. And now he ends up kind of becoming a part of the chacham's household in a way that like is, I mean, it's almost like it's like mishleically emasculating. Like, he should be someone who is like, has the chachma to be able to provide for his family, and he replaced the chachma with laziness. And now he has to be provided for by someone who actually can do the job. Yeah, Chaim?
Yeah, I was gonna respond to Ayala's point about like why is it so bad for the guy to be like dependent on the chacham, but like the pasuk and like everyone's saying like he's a servant to the chacham. He's not just like dependent. Like being a servant, being an eved is like it's an automatic. Like it's similar to what you're saying. It's also like an automatic like loss of like mobility and loss of like autonomy.
Right. Yes. By the way, I don't know if this is a literal eved the way the Metzudas David is learning it, because he says, I mean, maybe he is, but eved l'chacham leiv lahachios nefesh atzmo, to sustain himself. I don't know if he's saying it figuratively, like he's just dependent on him. Not sure. Did you just put coffee up there?
I tried to lower my hand and the coffee.
Is that taunting me? Are you taunting me because I'm giving up coffee?
No, oh no, I was gonna say, oh man, I had a point just now on that point you just made. Oh yeah. Evan doesn't even need to be. That's what I'm saying. I'm interpreting Evan just to mean somebody who's like doesn't have full
Right,
like,
lost his autonomy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm
I
like
hear
in
you,
that
yeah.
sense, like nobody wants to be like that.
Right,
And, like,
right. Yeah.
especially if you're like the leader, they're supposed to be like the head of the house.
Right. Yeah, like I think you're right that like all things being equal, if we could assign him a role, then like it'd be good for him to be an eved to a chacham, and like probably developmentally, then he'll also gain from that. But like it's not something that we that anyone like want. It's not a lechatchila situation. Yeah, Ariel.
Yeah, I was gonna. Can you maybe say that it's kind of like hurting his ego a little bit.
Yeah.
The lazy person, because he through his laziness he kind of like fell in this pitfall where now his family is dependent on him, and ultimately if he was by himself, like I don't think he would necessarily care so much.
Yeah, right.
I think because of his family now he's kind of like in a situation where he's forced to do the thing that he most hates, as we discussed earlier, where he has to now seek help out of a specific individual who he completely hates because it's anti his very nature.
Yeah.
Maybe you could say that the chidush of the pasuk is, to warn him or warn a guy who's in the state. Maybe he will listen to this point.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know if he's going to listen. I just want to raise another.
Oh, sorry.
Just another question that I want to answer here, which is why focus on the inheriting anger, like, and making everyone in his household angry? That's another weird. Like the thing that's weird to me about this pasuk with the Metzudas David is like these seemingly like, okay, I get this is all bad, but okay, we're talking guy is lazy, he ruins his household, he makes them angry, and then he has to like give up his autonomy and be dependent on chacham. Like it's oddly specific points to focus on just a lazy person,
So what were the first two again?
Well, he's corrupting his house, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to being this is really the opposite of the tzaddik, right? The tzaddik is going to provide the needs for all of his house, and this guy is not providing the needs. Okay, and it's coming from laziness. Okay, so he's like the anti-tzaddik. It's lazy. He ends up inheriting anger, right? That's the consequence we're talking about, right? Is anger. Then as a result of that, the second consequence is he becomes an eved, meaning he's dependent now, and it's dependent specifically on a chacham leiv. So like what common subject ties these qualities together?
Right. So you were cutting out a little bit, but I think I got it. Maybe you could say that corrupting the household just means that as a father, your kids look up to you, right? Your family looks to you as the role model, and ultimately your kids will be learning from you, right?
So I mean,
Yeah.
that's a good idea, but Metzudas David is not taking that approach because he's saying ocher umashli. He's saying he's ruining his household members by not providing their needs. He's not focusing on learning or character or anything like that.
Well, I think that their needs are someone who need to teach them the right way of
That's not what
living.
he's saying. That's definitely not what he's saying. Yeah, I mean, if your idea, that could be fine, but that's not what he's saying. De machzoram, like that is the phrase that the Torah uses for providing needs for a poor person, like food, clothing, shelter. Yeah, and he doesn't say anything about like character or needs as a need. I mean, yeah.
Can you just repeat like what the 5 things are saying? Not
Yeah,
each
let me write
thing, but
them
like
down.
what are you looking for?
Yeah, the 5 weird things about this pasuk, okay, is we're talking about we're focused on this pasuk is about a lazy person who neglects his family's basic needs, okay, who gets the consequence of making them angry, okay, as his inheritance, which forces him, sorry, gotta make this proper, which forces him to forfeit his autonomy. I know I spelled forfeit wrong, by becoming dependent on a chacham lave specifically. So like my question is, I get it. You tell me, give me a good old pasuk about laziness in Mishlei. The chacham becomes rich and the lazy person loses money. Okay, I can get that, right? Or like the lazy person, doesn't plant his in the planting season and doesn't have anything in the harvest season. Okay, great, I get it. Lazy people don't get good stuff. But now we're talking about a lazy person who is ruining his family. But that's not the bad thing. The bad thing is he makes them angry and he has to suffer their anger. But that's not even the bad thing. The bad thing is now he has to be dependent on someone. But it's not just being dependent on someone. He has to be dependent on a chacham late. Why are we talking about these weird things? It'd be like if I told you, just to use an analogy to capture the weirdness. Okay, if I say, if I'm giving tochacha and I say like, if you don't study hard, you're gonna have to get like a less than ideal job. That's like a normal tochacha. But if I say, if you don't study hard, then you're going to have to you're not going to be able to afford a car and you're going to take a bus and you're going to get like in a bus accident. And as a result of that, like the medical bills are going to embarrass people. Like why you look at me, you're like, why are you taking this weird route of depicting these like highly specific consequences? Yeah, Ayala?
So this doesn't really answer those questions so
That's
much,
fine.
but just maybe like it kind of is giving me the idea that like at the end of the day, the lazy person / this type of fool, like there is no winning, like no matter what. And maybe it's speaking to him on his level, like these are the negative consequences which would speak to him, and it's saying like no matter what, you're gonna be, every single person in this world is gonna end up being a servant to chacham lev, because like there's just no other way.
Yeah.
And these are speaking to the Atzel and his consequences.
Okay. So that I like. Okay. So in other words, that accounts for the particularity and the randomness, which is that like this doesn't end well for you. You just end up becoming miserable, and losing everything that you have. Like that's, and it's just depicting it in highly vivid terms. Yeah. Okay, so I think we're now on the cusp of finishing the idea, and then I'll take other things. So now, what's the chidush though? That's the question.
Yeah, I was gonna build on that, on what Ayala said. I think that like these specific. Can you go back to those specific things? Sorry.
Yeah.
Like those specific things is kind of it kind of hits him on a personal level. Like each specific thing, like he's only angry based off of his framework, right? Not necessarily angry about what he's doing to his kids, but their kids' reaction to his behavior is
Right,
kind of
they're
what's
angry.
yeah, he's just getting angry of the consequences of what happened. So you're kind of like talking to him at his level, right?
Just let me make sure I understand. The thing is he's not feeding his kids, so his kids are angry. And so he has a house full of people who are fighting and who are angry, and that's miserable, makes him miserable.
Yeah, that's what makes him miserable. Like his kids are angry, but it ultimately makes him miserable, and that's ultimately what's bothering him. Like you're talking to him at his level, and maybe the chidush of the pasuk is it's coming to. Yeah, I know you said he may not listen, but maybe the chidush is it's coming to teach you how to speak at his level.
Yeah,
how to have a communication with him.
Yeah, I do think I just want to bring a raya for this, and then I'll call on everyone else. That this is the raya that the raya is this is how Shlomo talks to a lazy person. I mean, the first time we see this in Mishlei is he says, hold on a second. I just don't remember where it is. I thought it was in 6. It's in 24. Okay. He says, al sadei ish atel avarti al kerem adam chasar lev. By the field of a lazy man I passed by, and the vineyard of a man who lacks understanding. Vihini ala kulo kimshonim. It was grown all over with thorns. Kasu fanav charulim v'geder avanav nehersa. It's the front of it was covered with ivy, and its fence of stones was crumbled. I saw and I took it to heart, and I took discipline. A little bit of sleep, a little bit of slumber, a little bit of folding of the hands to lie down. And your poverty will come like a traveler, and you're lacking like an armed man. So again, very vivid description, creating like a whole scene of like walking by this house that's been neglected, so that is how you have to talk to the lazy person, because it's the conflict. The lazy person has one advantage going to him, okay, which is that he can be motivated by pain and conflict. But the thing is this pain and conflict is in the future. So what you have to do is you have to bring it into the present. And the only way to bring it into the present is by simulating it through vivid imagination of like what it's going to be like. Like you talk to this guy and you're like, do you really want to come home every day to a house full of with your wife nagging you, your kids crying because they can't get food, and then you have to go out and like apply to like get tzedakah from your rich classmate from high school who like wasn't lazy and like built this whole business, and like that he's kind to you, but you think that he's really judging you, and you're going to be there every time, and like all the other guys are going to be going around your age, and like they all have autonomy, and like you have to like really drive it home and like make the pain real to him, through this particular method. Okay, I'm liking this approach. Yeah, Rivki, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say something I think similar to what you were just saying when Ariel said that. I think like not like necessarily the chidush, but like what I was understanding from this is that like the end result of this person, whether like it's the Metzudas David is saying is a lazy person, or just like the ocher, like whatever, I'm not sure exactly what we characterize him as, but that the end result is that you would be an eved, and like in whatever terms that means, that's like going exactly against like what his nature is, because as an eved, like you don't have like even the choice to not make those choices.
Right.
So I think like that end result being that like you don't even have the ability to have the bechira to be like, oh, I don't really feel like making money today.
Yeah.
Like, so it's kind of like you were saying, like driving that home of like, no, like you can't even do that. And your whole family's mad and X, Y, and Z.
Right. That's good, especially with a lazy person, because what is the lazy person not? Lazy person has this fantasy that I can be independent of people making claims on me and telling me what to do if I just ignore those. But guess who can't ignore them? The eved. If you're an eved, you can't just ignore those things. And so he's gonna get himself into this situation that he really doesn't want. Yeah, that's good. It's like the kid. I mean, I don't know if they have this in Jewish schools, but like when I was growing up in public school, like the threat that like kids who were like in danger of failing would be, you have to go to summer school, and like no anything but that. Like these kids hate school and they love summer, so the worst thing is that they have to go to school during the summer, and during the year. Yeah, Benji.
I like that for the slave. I had a little different idea.
Sure.
You could say so like really, it's not like you're a slave to a particular, like you are an eved to this rich chacham, but really it's that like when we're saying that you're an eved to it, means that that's your only way to fix your situation is by adopting not philosophy, but like the approach of a chacham and not giving into your laziness. So it's not like you can just like, I don't know, just like somehow fix it or somehow, find some way out to fix your situation. But the only way to stop all this fighting or whatever is that you're in is that you're going to be reliant on the approach of a chacham. Like
so not that you're gonna have to like make a financial arrangement with the chacham. You're saying you're gonna have to like subordinate yourself to the chacham leiv's approach.
Mm-hmm. And from his
Okay, that's an interesting approach. Yeah. Hold on. Eved evil chacham leiv. I mean, that does fit into Sadigon's thing that it's fitting for him to be a servant to a wise person. Meaning, like that would be his remedy, right? Like, let me see what Sadigon
I
actually.
know this is a bit of a stretch, also, but like
Yeah.
chacham leiv would be like changing his internal like system.
Right. Yeah, I hear that. Yeah, that's definitely a possibility. Yeah, not for the Metzudas David, but for the pasuk. Yeah. Okay. Hold on just a second here. I just want to I don't want to do a whole new approach. I just want to see if this is a similar enough approach here. Yeah, I mean, Meiri says something similar. He says, so this is giving you practical advice to be, have zrizus, to have like, dedication and zeal, and strive in the malacha of your house and the work of your inheritance. And if you're lax in this, if you're lazy, all the more so if you're a fool who like squanders his money actively. Yinchal ruach, he will inherit wind. Klomar nachalaso hevav, his inheritance will be nothingness and emptiness. The Radak's father, Rav Yosef Kimpa, gives a nice mashal where like this guy, two sons inherit vineyards from their father, and one son works at the vineyard day and night and like turns into a much bigger business. The other son like basically uses the vineyard to just get drunk, and then like ends up like the vineyard, then he doesn't like plant and care for it, and then the vineyard like goes to waste, and then he ends up just being having nothing, so that's the that's good mashal. Then Meiri goes on and he says, the eved nearly shehu davar shame davar miloshin avoda, so it's a noun. Klomar nachlas ha'evil of avodaso tagia liad chacham leiv. So the evil's inheritance and his work will come into the possession of the chacham leiv. Kila sichluso olatzluso yishar ani. Because this guy, due to his foolishness or his laziness, he will remain poor. V'yimkor es kol shelo, have to sell all of his possessions. But pikeach hamaskil, and the intelligent guy yiknem mimeno, will buy it from him below hon for not a lot of money. V'lo yarba b'mechirav. In other words, he'll buy it for a pretty cheap price because this guy had to like sell all this stuff last minute. Some people say it's going to be literally an eved. Yeah. All right. So I think the approach that we get. All right. So we had a lot of approaches, but just to sum it up, the approach that we got in full was that of the Metzudas David, which is saying that this is talking to a person who is in charge of a household but is prone to laziness, and if that continues, what's going to happen is a whole host of bad things. And like I was saying, it's not going to end well, and it's going to not end well in a way that is exactly what this guy hates, which is that everyone is going to be mad in his house, everyone's going to be fighting. He doesn't like that conflict. He's going to have to lose his autonomy and be forced into a situation where he's working or where he sells his stuff, whatever you want to say it is. Or if you want to take advantage of things, he's going to have to like subordinate himself to becoming a chacham. See, I think the reason I think that's a true idea. I don't think you can really use that argument for him. Like, sir, like if you keep on continuing this way, you're going to have to like become someone who like lives the Mishlei lifestyle, he's going to just shrug it off, you know. But you say, oh, you're going to have to actually like work a night job, then that's going to like horrify him, you know, or like an early job. I don't know which one horrifies him worse. And so the chidush of the pasuk though is really teaching you methodology and how to attack laziness, which is you have to vividly depict a plethora of consequences that you're going to get stuck in if you continue on this laziness approach, you know. And I think that is often, you know, you might say, well, isn't that highly particular? Well, yeah, that's what happens to lazy people, is that they push off things until they get stuck in scenarios that are mishleic mida keneged mida, where they have to contend with their laziness in a way that's even more like annoying than the one that they were trying to avoid initially, you know. So that you know it has to be depicted to them in those terms. So the chidush here is really in terms of how you reach the lazy person, not so much in the consequence. We have lots of other pasukim about the consequence of a lazy person. Yeah, Ayala?
So just some overall Mishnah methodology point.
Yeah.
So like I know we look for a chidush in every pasuk,
Yeah.
but also that Mishlei is making things real to the emotions.
Yeah.
So is it possible that like there are a few psukim which have the same like chidush, let's say, but they're just like different circumstances in order to make it real in different ways?
Yes. So this is a tricky thing. When I say I'm looking for the chidush and when I say I'm not bothered by the chidush, so I realize that there are different standards of chidushim, you know, like taking Mishlei's four audiences here of the L'seis l'pasayim arma, so you got the pesi to give cunning to the pesi. L'na'ar dasa mazima, to give knowledge and design to the na'ar. Yishma chacham v'yosef lekach, the chacham will hear and he'll gain more learning. V'navon takbulas yikne, and the navon will acquire strategies. So the pesi is going to see a chidush on a much lower bar than the chacham, you know, like there's different like levels of looking for a chidush. So I think for the pesi, the chidush is often going to be just the basic idea, and then there are going to be many of the ideas, so many psukim that are the same idea, just hit them on different emotional levels, you know. But I'm really trying to learn this. I'm trying to like get I'm not a Mishlei navon in terms of my decision making, but I think in terms of the level that I'm demanding of Mishlei right now, in terms of my intellectual learning, I'm looking for it on a navon level, you know. So I'm trying to get some sort of new insight that is new to me, because I still feel like there's a lot there. And if I don't ask that question, like if I content myself with this is giving an old idea but just hitting it from a new emotional angle, even though I'm aware that Mishlei does do that, I wouldn't grow in my Mishlei if I didn't demand that of the psukim. So that's why I always ask those questions.
What does tachbulo mean literally? Yeah, that answers.
It literally means strategies.
Okay.
Let me see what is this. The BDB says. Yeah, it says directions or counsel, guidance, steering, direction. It's interesting. It comes from the word chevel, I guess, like ropes, which I guess they're saying is like steering and directing a ship. I don't know. Yeah, Ariel?
I was wondering if we could take a look at Rav Sadikon's approach.
Yeah, Sadikon's approach I didn't quite understand when I read it. He says a siklus nikras ruach. So foolishness is called ruach. Klomar shi ruach hanoshaves. It's like a wind that just blows. Kamoshin emar hachacham ya'aned das ruach. Like it says, a chacham will answer foolishness with knowledge. Uleruach imrei noash. So he doesn't even explain the pasuk. He just explains the word.
That's funny.
Unfortunately, right. Yeah. Then let's just summarize the other half approaches that we had, at least some of them. So the one I like the best, I think, was Benji's approach, which I think was a good update on Zach's approach, which is that if you're sullying your household, then you're sure to create an inheritance of that same foolishness, you know. And by sullying your household is just like bad mouthing your again, family, household, institution, nation, group, whatever it is, just bad mouthing it without not in a constructive growth oriented way, but in a like, yeah, oh, like this is just like some bad thing that we have, or like what we have to live with this, whatever. And that's going to create an inheritance of that foolishness. Evet evil l'chacham lev, we don't really have. I don't really get that. And now I'm just blanking on all the other approaches we had.
The metaphysical approach
of bringing in if you bring in non-Torah values or foolish values, then that's gonna like ruin the inheritance. And you'd be better off just being guided by a chacham. Very metaphysical.
Perfect.
Yep. Yeah, Chaim, just jog my memory about what your approach was again.
Yeah, I was saying that the what's it called, Dad? The Avil.
Yeah.
That the Avil dad is going to like upset his kids, and that they're
Or
going
and drive them
to
away. Right. Yeah.
like flip them, and then outwardly to him
Yeah.
they'll
Right,
be
right.
just like these crazy kids, but really they're like
Yeah.
manipulating him.
Yeah, I can't quite articulate. I feel like it's just too particular at the end. I'm not quite sure. I don't like that. Okay, all right. So this was a good. We got a good idea out of this. We got a good methodology out of this. And I'll add one more point methodologically. Even though the lazy person needs this, but I do think that that really, if you want to make Mishlei ideas real to you, then this is what you have to do also. This is the whole derech of Mishlei, like Sadigon says, is you have to speak to the emotions in a language that they understand, which is through vivid particular imagery, which is why, again, I know this is like not necessarily like approved of by all sectors of the Chachamim that we follow, but like this is why Rabbi Moskowitz was very into short stories, and why I'm very into movies, is that like, you know, if it's a well-written story, not just short stories, but if it's a well-written story that depicts consequences in vivid ways, or if it's a well-made movie that makes it real to you, that is how you make the ideas real to you. Like people don't get affected by abstractions; they get affected by like visceral, imagination-based sensory things, you know. And so that's how you can affect your emotions. So that's what I would recommend as the methodology. Yeah. Okay. Good idea. And we're almost done with chapter 11. Nice.
What do we're going to your base next?
Yep, that's the plan.
I remember you had a Havamina last year too.
Oh, you're right. I did have a hobby. We're going to switch to 25. Yeah, I think I
Yeah.
want to continue going. Yeah. Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Have a good night, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.